The Securities and Exchange Commission was looking after Zcash for the last 2.5 years. Now they have closed the investigation without any enforcement, and so the price is going up. Zcash is the only altcoin that was actually able to make significant gains in the last year. This is the performance of the altcoin market of all the alts that are listed on Binance. Now, one of the reasons for the continued performance is, of course, the Grayscale Zcash trust as well. So traditional finance can buy into Zcash via that trust. But the question is, are we now too late to buy Zcash? Should we potentially take profit? Because the chart looks potentially dangerous. This is Zcash in US dollars. We are very close to the all-time high. And in the past, so in 2018, 2019, we fell 96% from that all-time high. So how much risk do we really face here? What's the risk versus potential return? Hi, my name is Gerhard. I've been in the crypto space for the last 8 years. I hit my first million 3 years ago. And in this video, I want to share the approaches that I personally look at in order to long-term outperform the market. On average, I've outperformed buying and holding Bitcoin over the last 5 years by on average 2% per month. The track record is linked down below. It's over here on the website. That's also where you can find the individual trades. It's all public. It's all announced in real time. And while I don't outperform every single month, it's the long term that counts. And I want to share in this video what I think are relevant metrics. Now, the Zcash Foundation is financially very healthy. It's got 36 million in assets, less than 1 million in expenses. But then on the other hand, we also see more and more trading volume and open interest. Now, open interest, that's the short-term bets on the price. And that can potentially inflate a rally and introduce more risk. Now what we see over here, that's the Zcash price relative to the rest of the altcoin market. I always like to look at those relative valuation charts because that way we can actually look at the idiosyncratic movements. So what's specifically happening to Zcash? We are completely filtering out the macro. So when Bitcoin and Ethereum goes up and most altcoins go up in the same degree, we completely want to filter that out. Same for the other direction. We just want to know how much does an asset outperform or underperform, because that's in the end what we are really interested in. We want to know, do we get additional compensation for that extra risk? Now, Zcash tended to underperform the rest of the altcoin market very consistently. When we measure this in TradingView, this even rounds it up to 100%. This ratio went from 60,000 to less than 1. So Zcash underperformed by 1 divided by 60,000. But then, since April of 2024, it outperformed by close to 4,000%. Now here's a similar chart. This is now Zcash relative to Bitcoin. It is a bit more volatile, as in the fluctuations relative to the altcoin market are smaller compared to the fluctuations relative to Bitcoin, because Zcash is an altcoin. It's more correlated with the rest of the altcoin market, not as much with BTC, but still, there is something interesting happening. This dotted line here, that's the average ratio of Zcash relative to Bitcoin. And it's now bang on that equilibrium. If Zcash was to hit the September 2017 highs, it could outperform by another 800% roughly. Now, is that the likely scenario? There are already memes circulating on Twitter how Tom Lee doesn't really like how the crypto space is moving further and further away from ETH and more into Zcash. Of course, the two assets are very different. Ethereum is for smart contracts, Zcash is rather for privacy. Still, the hype is shifting from the old guard, from Ethereum to Zcash. How sustainable is that shift though? The tokenomics of Zcash are rather healthy, as in it inflates as quickly as Bitcoin. It's got the same release schedule. And in the early days, that release schedule obviously was too aggressive. Otherwise, we wouldn't have seen that underperformance. But maybe now the release schedule isn't too bad anymore. Maybe now the demand finally outgrows the supply growth. Because it's always about the marginal buyer and the marginal seller, right? When the marginal seller, so the miners of Zcash, are not selling at a faster rate than there is demand, then of course the price has to outperform. Token inflation does have an impact though. This is the long-term price development. We are close to the all-time highs. Here is the long-term market cap development. That's already reached an all-time high. So because of the token inflation, the price has a harder time reaching new heights compared to the market cap. Now, what about the usage of the Zcash blockchain though? Is this going up? Are there more and more transactions happening over time? Let's have a look at this, and let's also compare this with Bitcoin, Ethereum, and the closest competitor, Monero. So that's what we've got over here. This is the number of Zcash transactions on a historical chart. The chart starts in 2016, and yes, there is slightly more activity recently, but it's not really a long-term growth chart. And the average number of transactions is maybe at around 10,000 per day. Compare that with Ethereum, that's closer to 2 million a day, and it did have constant growth over time. Now, what about Bitcoin? That's over here. That's got around 500,000 transactions per day. Again, compared to just 10,000. What about Monero though? Let's plot this in the same chart. That's over here. Zcash relative to Monero. Monero tends to have around 25,000 transactions per day. Zcash is below that. We can also make the argument that Monero has long-term growth in the number of transactions, while Zcash seems to be lagging behind. And so is this all just hype? Is this all just an inflated price in Zcash? Let's have a look at the short-term speculation. So we've got the spot trading volume, that's 200 million in the last 24 hours. And we've got the perpetual futures trading volume, that's 1.3 billion. So more than 6 times the spot market. The price discovery really happens on the perpetual futures market for most active rallies nowadays. And while the rally in October and November was pretty much a short squeeze, so the funding rate was negative and the market makers bought up more Zcash in order to liquidate all of those shorts, that's not necessarily true anymore because the funding rate is fluctuating around 0. So see how the market makers, they sold off Zcash after they had done the short squeeze. They had done a mini short squeeze in April of this year, then subsequently sold off again, but this time the funding rate is rather healthy. Yet we still see some liquidations. Of course, when an asset rallies like this, there are enough skeptics. The trading volume though is not as high as it used to be. And there is a correlation between trading volume and price. The more trading volume there is, the more attention there is on the price. Thus, spot goes up. When the attention moves away, the price tends to follow as well. Currently, the trading volume is not as high as it once was. So the current elevated price isn't necessarily as fragile as it was in November of last year. What is concerning though is the open interest. So that's the amount of bets on the Zcash price. There is not as much short-term transactions, but there is a lot of short-term bets, as in people just have position bets on Zcash. They just buy the futures in order to hold Zcash for a bit longer, which is funny because it's expensive to hold an asset via the futures, right? It costs, financing costs on average of around 11% per annum to bet long on an asset. So on Hyperliquid, the default is 10.95% per annum that the longs have to pay the shorts. And so buying an asset on the futures rather than the spot market is expensive. And there's a lot of that kind of demand. And when that demand, when the bets on an asset go down, that also drags down the price with it. And that's the major issue here. The trading volume might not be at an all-time high, but the number of short-term position bets definitely is. And so with more open interest, there's also more potential risk. Now, I ran a few numbers. I ran a backtest to try to time the market for Zcash. So I looked at the optimal golden cross and death cross. So in this example chart, we just have the 50-day SMA and the 200-day SMA. But the idea is when the shorter term moving average crosses the longer term, we've got a signal to buy, and vice versa. When we fall below, we've got a signal to sell. And so I ran the numbers using Bitcoin Strategy Analytics, that's the backtesting platform available to the premium members of this channel. There's also explainer videos for every single one of those backtesting modes. And I tried to figure out what's happening here with Zcash. So what we've got here on the x-axis, that's the slower moving average. What we've got on the y-axis, that's the fast moving average. We try to find out what trading strategy in terms of moving average crosses tends to work the best for Zcash. And the result, that's over here, the 2-day with the 35-day simple moving average. That brings us the following return. Buying and holding Zcash would have brought us 15% per annum. Using that moving average trading strategy, strategy would have given us 80% per annum. The maximum drawdown moves from 97% to only 73%. And that's then how that looks like over time. So we're just getting out of the market whenever we get a death cross, we get into the market whenever we have a golden cross. At the bottom, we see the value in Zcash. So not in US dollars, but in Zcash. The US dollar chart is here in the middle. And so I think this is a quite useful approach to figure out when this current rally might actually be over. So let's swap to the live chart. This approach gave us a buying signal at the end of March, and the 35-day SMA is currently at $457. So that's a short-term risk, as in if we fall below that for more than 2 days, the current rally might at least be temporarily over. This is also when the past rally in September, October stopped. And so I very much like those kind of backtests. They at least give us clear rules of how in the past an asset behaved, and very often the future at least rhymes with the past. And so that's then where my active trading comes in. This is my track record since I published the trades live. On average, 5.3% gains per trade. And every single trade is locked over here. For example, this year, right? Backtesting, a 50% gain. That was, of course, a nice outperformer. There are links to every single trade. So you can see this is all 100% legitimate. We can open the message over here on the 26th of May last year. I'm opening a short on Backtesting for this example. And then the selling signal that was 46 days afterwards. That's then over here. And that's where I quote unquote sold, as in I got stopped out at that point in time out of all positions except 2 others that were running at the time. That, by the way, is the chart of the copy trading vault last year, where we made annualized 40%. This year we are also on track to achieve the same. The automatic copy trading is available to the annual subscribers. If you do manual copy trading, you get the live trading signals for your own trading. So I try to be as transparent as possible. Of course, the open positions are not shown over here, but all the trade history that's also available on the website outside of the login. And I don't know many others that are willing to share all of that data. So yeah, for Zcash, the 35-day simple moving average is extremely important. If we fall below that for more than 2 days, this current rally that started at the beginning of April might come to a halt. If you found this video useful, feel free to subscribe. I publish videos regularly. A like would be very much appreciated as well. It helps the channel grow. A link to premium pops up here on the screen. There's also a 7-day money back guarantee. So in case you don't like premium, just message me within the first 7 days and I'll just refund you to your credit card or to your crypto in case you paid via crypto. Both is possible. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Cheers.